Welcome everyone to the CNI Leaders Network meeting. I think everyone was emailed the Google folder by Denise, so if you need to access the documents, they're in the Google folder. Shannon Baker is unable to be here today due to a family emergency, and she's okay, but she has something happening in her family, and she would love to be here, but she can't. So I'm filling in for her today, and it's my pleasure to be here with you. I hope everyone is doing well. It's a very, very busy time of year, and we're excited you're here. So with that, we'd like to see, I know we have several people on the webcast. Welcome to those who are in the digital land. And if we can find out who's in the room, if everyone doesn't mind standing up and introducing themselves to the group, we'll start over here, please.
Hi, I'm Pamela Raven. I'm with Educational Technology. If you can wait for the mic, sorry.
Oh.
So everybody can hear you.
Yeah.
Oh, that's okay. Hi, I'm Pamela Raven. I'm in Educational Technology. I work with Erin, and I don't remember what the other part of the question was, but I'm...
Just introduce yourself. Yeah, thank you.
Hi, Pam. Hi, I'm Erin English. I'm the Executive Director of Innovation. Grateful to be here, and I work with Pam.
Good morning. I'm Pauline Crooks. I'm the Visual and Performing Arts Coordinator here at the County Office of Education.
Hi there, my name is Jenna Weiner. I'm the principal at Boulder Oaks in the Alpine School District and also leading our curriculum.
Good morning, I'm Bruce Peterson. I work with juvenile court schools, and I'm the Executive Director with Student Services and Programs right here at the county office.
Hi, I'll stand up, I'm short. Hi, I'm Meg Jacobson. I'm the Executive Director of Innovation, Engagement, and Learning Support in La Mesa Spring Valley School District.
Hi, I'm Dom Minutelli, and I am Director of Curriculum and Assessment for Santee School District.
Good morning, I'm Kathleen Sorensen. I'm Director of Curriculum and Assessment at Escondido Union Elementary District.
Hi, I'm Kim Reed, Assistant Soup of Ed Services in the Lakeside School District.
Teresa Kemper, Assistant Union High School District.
Good morning, Gina Bishop from San Marcos, Assistant Superintendent.
Good morning, everybody. I'm the Paul Doctremont, the Director of College and Career Readiness in the Grossmont Union High School District.
Dan McDowell, Director of Learning and Innovation, also from the Grossmont Union High School District.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Cindy Wagner, Deputy Superintendent in the South Bay Union School District.
Hi, I'm Sally Ahern. I am a coordinator in Lemon Grove.
Good morning, Eddie Caballero, Assistant Superintendent, Lemon Grove.
Good morning, I'm Kathy McBride with Capital Advisors. Christine Shipman, Executive Leadership Coach, SDCOE.
Good morning, I'm Kelly Bass. I'm from Ramona Unified, and I'm the Assistant Soup.
Good morning, Debbie Thurston, Director of High School Programs with Vista Springs.
Thank you very much, everyone. We're glad you're here today with us. So the purpose of the CNI meeting is to provide CNI leaders with timely information, build collective leadership capacity, and network to share best practices across districts. So with that, I'd like everyone to stand up for a moment. We're going to warm up a little bit. You're going to find someone you don't know, and you're going to share one positive thing that's happening in your district, because we need some positivity. So share one positive thing happening in your district with someone you don't know. Okay, I'm going to give you 2 more minutes to share and make sure each of you have had a chance to share, please. I could have everyone finish up their thoughts and then find their seats, please. Thank you for sharing some positivity with each other. When we network to share best practices, I think that's a powerful mission of this group. And so we're here to serve you and to support you, but it's also really important to take the time to learn and support each other as a network. So our agenda for today includes some important updates, California legislative updates from Capital Advisors Group. And then we will also have an LCAP discussion, and we will review some upcoming SCCOE events. And with that, I would like to introduce Kathy McBride, who's a partner with Capital Advisors Group. Thank you.
Good morning, and thanks for the promotion. I appreciate it. I'm not actually a partner, but thank you. I appreciate it. No, really. Would you like your phone? Just grab my stuff real quick. So good morning. How's everybody? I'm happy to be here in beautiful San Diego. I had a Tesla pick me up for the ride over. Run a Lyft, and that was a first. So, a couple of updates from Sacramento, and then want to talk about where we are with the process, the governor a little bit, what got vetoed, what got signed, what that means, what's going to come up, what we think is going to happen in the upcoming budget based on our conversations that we've had with Senate and Assembly leadership and the governor's office. And then I'd love to hear from you. What's on your mind? What is the state doing well? What does the state need to do better? Just because I think that helps us advocate on folks' behalf better in Sacramento when we hear from the folks who are actually doing the work. So that said, and then also if while I'm going through something, if you have a question, if that's okay with you guys, raise your hand, let me know. I'm happy to do it kind of more informal, more of a conversation. So, as you know, the legislature is on a break. They come back in the beginning of January 6th this year, for the second half of the 2019-2020 legislative session. The Governor Newsom, this was his first bill signing, being the new governor. He had, I think, just under 900 bills, and he vetoed 170 of them, I think. So a lot of bills got signed. It's hard to imagine that there's that many laws that we need, but apparently there are. So a lot of those are education bills. A lot of the education bills that we saw were reduced from policies that Governor Brown vetoed. Some are consistent vetoes, some are not. Charter schools, I know Barrett talked about that last time he was here. That was something that had been, as you know, pent up for many, many years since Governor Brown did not want to ever make any changes to the law. So we saw some changes to that, some very interesting changes, a lot in 1505, and like I said, I think Barrett went through that last time. If you have questions, we can talk about it. How that plays out is yet to be determined. The bill was negotiated by the governor's office, the CTA, and the Charter Schools Association. There wasn't a whole lot of input from anyone else, which is both good and bad. So the implementation, I think, should be interesting. I know that the superintendent of public instruction has a work group that he's put together within CDE to work on the implementation and to try to be helpful to the field. And then also yesterday, I think it was last night, he named, Superintendent Thurman named a new charter schools division director. Her name is Stephanie Farland. I don't know if any of you know her. She's had her own charter school consulting gig for probably 13 years or so. And prior to that, she spent quite a lot of time doing just charter school stuff at CSBA. She's a friend of mine. She's really great. And I think what she will hopefully bring to the department is making the department and the charter schools division in particular more of a resource to folks. Because I know a lot of times I hear from folks when they call CDE, they don't get an answer, or they're not as helpful as folks would hope. So anyhow, Stephanie's new. She's great. I think she starts in December. So if you work on charter school stuff and have questions, she's a good one to talk to. So October 13th, this past October 13th at midnight was the deadline for Governor Newsom to either sign, veto, or act on any legislation on his desk. And there were a couple of bills that I wanted to bring up. The school start time bill, are you all familiar with that bill? Middle school can't start at 8. So he signed that. Governor Brown vetoed it last year. This bill kind of has a long sordid history. It's actually the same bill number as it was before. And 2.5 years ago, when Senator Portantino introduced this bill, it was kind of dead on arrival. I mean, he couldn't get the votes for it. There was no support. And then he got appointed the chair of the Appropriations Committee, which is in Sacramento, a very powerful committee. It basically makes the determination if your bill has a cost, it can move forward or not. It's supposed to look at the cost of the bill and not necessarily the policy, but it's a very political committee. And so, and the chair has a lot of discretion. So he used that post to make deals for votes on his bill. And that's not a secret in Sacramento. I'm not telling anything, I mean, we would go and try to talk to members about this bill when it was moving through the legislature, especially in the second house. And they just said, he's got me in a corner. I can't do anything about it. He won't let me bill out unless I vote for his bill. So I already said he would. Or he's made promises that the schools in my district won't be affected by this bill, which is not true. There's no exemptions in the bill. It can't be waived by the state board. They did move the implementation back 3 years, which I think will be helpful. Rural school districts, I cannot say rural, I don't know why, but rural school districts are supposed to be exempted in the bill. However, there's not a definition for that. So I think moving forward, you'll probably see some cleanup, but the Pro Tem's office has made it very clear that any cleanup goes through Senator Portantino. So no, there won't be an end run to try to fix the bill from folks who might be regretful of how this will play out in their districts. I'm sure some of them are probably hearing from their school districts and their superintendents now. This probably, I've been doing this for, 20 years or so. This is probably the most political bill I've seen in all of that time. Just the kind of trickery and the I'll give you this if you give me that is very, very interesting. Unfortunately not for what I would think is the best policy. You all know you could do this if you want to, so now you just have to. I wouldn't be surprised if, as we near the implementation date, you might see a bill to kick it out a little bit, but we'll see. Time will tell. So that was a sign. And the governor's office, we know that there was quite a few people in his office, his staff in particular, that also did not like the bill and tried to talk him out of signing it. And he would not budge. He erred on the side of science, and people brought him other science to counteract that, and it just didn't work. So I don't know what the backstory is there. Apparently he promised the senator he'd sign the bill back in January, and so he signed the bill. So let's see, ethnic studies. I'm sure you're all aware that when the draft came out for the framework, it was not received with open arms. People didn't like it. Members of the legislature, the superintendent of public instruction, the president of the State Board of Education all came out and pushed back on it. So all of the deadlines for that framework have been pushed back. They did that in the legislature. So they have changed the adoption for that framework. It was December 31st, 2019. It's now been extended a year, so December 31st, 2020. And then as part of the Education Omnibus trailer bill cleanup, it also extended by the year a deadline in which the state board must adopt a model curriculum. So that's pushed back until March 31st, 2021. So that'll allow some more time statutorily for them to do the work and hopefully come back with a product that folks will want to use because they believe in it. I mean, it's great if you have a model curriculum, but if no one likes it, no one's going to use it, I would imagine. Also, there was a bill, AB 331 by Assemblymember Medina that would have required the completion of a semester-long course in ethnic studies be added to high school graduation requirements. That bill was put on hold given everything that happened with the frameworks. So that bill is still technically what we call alive, so it could move next year. I think it'll just depend on how far the state board and the IQC get with the frameworks and kind of what the temperature is for folks. Folks, I think, see it moving in a good way, then they'd be inclined to probably move the bill next year. Otherwise, I think you see it being held, and then it'll probably come back in 2021. So right now is the second year of a 2-year session. So any bill that wasn't either killed, given to the governor, or held, if they're held, they're still up. I mean, they're still alive. So that deadline next year will change. So you start at the beginning of a 2-year session with a clean slate. So there are no bills that are existing like there are right now, just so that you know that. AB 751, the Pathway to College Act. This was a redo of a bill from last year that Governor Brown vetoed. Governor Newsom also vetoed it, so I don't think we'll see it coming back. Let me grab his veto message real quick, because I think it's interesting. And I bring up these veto messages. I used to work for Governor Brown, so I think that you can infer some things from the veto messages if you pay attention and read them as to what might be forthcoming. So I think that's a little bit interesting. So with 751, basically said, California's made great strides towards establishing a coherent accountability system, measuring how students through the state program on our state's assessments, including grade 11 assessments, provide critical information to students and families. K-12 system and public universities continue to discuss the potential for using California's grade 11 assessment for college admissions or eligibility purposes for the future. This would be a better approach to improving access to college for underrepresented students and reducing testing fatigue. So if you read that, you'd think that that might be something his office is going to start looking into, right? He doesn't like using an alternate test, but using the SBAC for other, using the statewide assessment rather for other purposes might be something that he's looked into. This has been something that they've talked about for years. They've just never done anything about it. It makes a lot of sense to make a test meaningful rather than testing the kids for all kinds of different things, right? If we can get him to do something with that, I think that that's a positive for the students. So hopefully we'll see sometime. Like I said, I like to read the veto messages, and I like to think you can get something out of them. Let's see. Another veto message that, this is 773. I won't go into what it is so much, but I only want to read this section because I think it's interesting. Governors have a hard time being consistent with their message. I think Governor Brown did sometimes, and Governor Newsom certainly did. But this veto, part of it says, rather than imposing a prescriptive requirement that imposes a one-size-fits-all requirement on each high school, I would prefer that the Secretary of State and the Superintendent of Public Instruction continue to coordinate to help register and pre-register young people to vote. Why do I bring that up? Because that's exactly what he did when he signed SB 328, which is the start time bill, right? It's a one-size-fits-all. Everyone must do it. So it's a little inconsistent, and I think you can expect that from governors, especially when you have a governor who's new and whose staff is new. Governor Newsom has a lot of staff. I don't know if you've heard that or not. he has, his office is what's called the Horseshoe in the state capitol. And when Governor Brown was there, it was pretty dingy. It needed new carpet, it needed new paint, and there were probably half of the staff that are in there now. So they've actually reconfigured meeting rooms to make office space for people. Some of the cabinet secretaries are in cubicles or sharing a large office with just desks. So it's interesting. We'll see how long that lasts. They're also getting ready in Sacramento to redo the state capitol, and that's going to take several years. So they're building a building across the street, and they're going to move all the legislative staff, the legislators, all the committee hearing rooms, the governor's office, all of his staff to a temporary building while they do the upgrade to the state capitol. So that'll take years, and so that should be very interesting. If you ever come to Sacramento and seen the old building and the committee hearings, and they're kind of grand and beautiful, it's really going to change how. I mean, I guess you could have a meeting anywhere, right? But it's just the whole process of it seems very interesting. So so look for that next time you come to Sacramento. It'll take a couple of years to get everybody, I think, out of there, but I think it'll be good. What can we expect in 2020? We recently had conversations with the governor's office, the pro tem's office, and Speaker Rendon's office with his education staff. They think mental health will be a priority for the administration in 2020, and likely there'll be a proposal in the January 10 budget specific to mental health. What that looks like, we don't know yet. Non-classroom based charter schools, you may recall in 1505, there's a moratorium for 2 years on non-classroom based. Apparently the governor is very frustrated. Actually, the words were extremely frustrated with non-classroom based charters. So, 2 years is a time to certainly have a conversation about non-classroom based. What his specific frustration is with that, I'm not exactly sure. But I think if the governor's paying attention to it, and if he's expressed frustration, we'll certainly see some movement one way or the other. I think it's interesting that they would want to, I think they have to talk about non-classroom based charters, but charters in general, this was a big lift for them to get this deal this year, especially in the first year of him being governor. And I don't think that his staff enjoyed it. I think it was a lot of negotiating with folks who typically don't agree. So the final product of that bill is just that. It's a negotiation, right? It's kind of like a budget. Right? Nobody gets what they want, everything that they want. And if everybody's a little grumpy, then maybe it's okay. But I would be surprised if he wants to go back down the charter road so soon. I don't know that his staff have the capacity to have those big fights with the legislature. I also know that legislative staff in particular was pretty, I don't want to say upset, but they were frustrated with the way that it was handled, and they were frustrated with the timelines. I think there was some extensions granted to the governor's office on some deadlines within the legislature that were as a courtesy because they just were running out of time before the legislature got out. So we'll see. I think that'll be interesting. The Department of Finance and the administration apparently plan to delve into AB 39, which you might recall is an LCFF base grant increase. I find that interesting. If they actually want to do that, that could be good news for everybody. If they want to increase the base amount, I mean, that's good. How they do that and why they want to do that, I'm not sure. There's been several bills for several years trying to explore some solutions and options to making sure that there is more funding. We know that there's not adequate funding, right? I think that probably the STRS, the PERS, the special ed costs are playing into that a lot. They know that that's not something that's going away. So. And I think it gets to a point probably where they can't with a straight face say, you have enough funding, go do what you're supposed to be doing. And, it's been since, 2013, I think, when they did LCFF. So I think this is an opportunity for a new administration to continue to support, the tenets of local control, but realize that there needs to be more funding if we're going to actually do right by our students. So that, I think, is great news. Let's see. What technical difficulty. The governor is a fan of LCFF, which is good. I think if you had somebody coming in, because there's a lot of members of the legislature who either have buyer's remorse or who weren't here when they actually voted on LCFF. So I think you will continue to see bills that recreate categorical funds. So, which is something that is, certainly counter to the idea of local control and you making the determinations and the decisions. Speaking of LCFF, the state auditor just released a state audit on LCFF. And how that works in the state legislature is the state auditor doesn't just audit whatever she likes. There's a committee within the legislature called JLAC. It's the Joint Legislative Audit Committee. And a member or members of the legislature get together and request an audit. And so in this case, I believe it was Shirley Weber, who you guys might know. And perhaps somebody else who asked the committee, and in turn the state auditor, to do an audit for LCFF. So there's some criticism. They looked at 3 school districts, Oakland, San Diego, and Clovis. The audit said that the base funding does not cover the necessary base costs, which of course everyone knows. Said it was difficult to figure out how at the end of the year, if you have unspent funds, you're spending those funds the next year, and some other stuff. I know that you're going to go into detail about it, so I won't. I just wanted you to know that it was out there. It will likely, the audit is out there, and the audit will likely, what happens is members see these audits, members of the legislature see these audits, and then they introduce bills, right, to try to fix whatever it is. So I think we'll probably see a lot of bills next year that deal with transparency, that try to change, the LCAP in some way. Again, I know that's always being redone. I know that they have the latest version that they pulled from the state board meeting in November and they pushed to January. So I know that that's frustrating for people. So hopefully the legislature can work it out. The audit also did kind of pick on the legislature and say you're not doing what you should be doing to ensure that these funds are going to the students that generated them. So let's see. I will only add to that Karen Staff Walters, the executive director of the State Board of Education, did say that the new template that they're supposed to approve in January included some of the recommendations from the audit. So what specifically those are, I don't know, but we'll find out in January. So hopefully that's positive. And if so, that would help in cutting down on the number of bills that are introduced in the legislature, right? If they've already made those changes and those recommendations, members aren't going to introduce bills to try to do that. So it's a good thing. One-time funding, the administration thinks that there will be one-time funding, and they're trying to be creative in the use of one-time funding, and potentially use Prop 98 money for CalSTRS or full-day kindergarten facilities. We'll see into the January 10 budget, if that's true. Also, remember, I think that wildfires and PG&E are going to be a giant topic of conversation and probably have a very big impact on the budget this year, unfortunately. With the wildfires and the power being shut off and all of that, I mean, that's something that, the legislature can't ignore and shouldn't ignore, but I assume that's going to factor in. And then the legislature, they didn't have, when we asked them about their priorities, they didn't have formal priorities yet, but they want to discuss mental health as well, which is good. So if everyone's on board with that, you'll probably see some money for mental health. How that looks, we don't know. And special education. They weren't specific about what their ideas were, but so in January 10th to be specific, constitutionally the governor has to put out a budget, right? And that's the starting point. And then the legislature in both houses, they put their priorities in and they have a bunch of conversations and committee hearings about how that works. So the more that everybody's kind of on the same page, the easier it makes it, right? Because then they're not fighting about whose priorities are best. So I think that's a positive thing if they're talking about special education and they're talking about mental health, all of them as a priority. I think that that's a good thing. The Senate would like to see stronger connections between county mental health agencies and LEAs. They also think that charter school reform is likely to come back. And again, this is the legislature, not the administration. They also talk about non-classroom based being an issue, and dealing with homeschool charters is likely to crop up. This has to do with schools that are helping families get around vaccine laws. They were very not specific about that, and as you can imagine, that's a touchy subject after this year. The vaccination bill and the charter schools bill have brought more people to the Capitol than I've ever seen. And typically they were set on the same day. So there were thousands of people in the hallways. You couldn't get around, and it was the whole families who came up to testify, and and the kids would even testify. And there were sit-ins at the governor's office for the vaccination bill. So if that comes back in some way, I think you'll see a replay of the whole thing. So if you're coming up to Sacramento, don't come on those days. If you want to get around the Capitol, probably not the best thing. Let's see. I think this is worth mentioning just for folks. At the end of the session, there was a deal on a facilities bond. It was AB 48, and it places a $15 billion state facilities bond on the March 2020 ballot. That's a very large facilities bond, I think the largest that we've ever seen. It's broken up between UC, CSU, community colleges, and then preschool through grade 12. There is money for new construction, modernization, career technical education facilities, and charter schools specific in there. So I think that's interesting. Special education, real quick, bills that were signed. AB 605, it was a Manshine bill. It talks about assistive technology devices. The idea of this bill is that if you have a student who's using a device, that they're not without if they're transferring from one school district to another. So they're putting that burden on the school district for 2 months. So if I have a student at my school district, I have to make sure that that student has a device in their transition. So there's not a waiting period and they're not without a device for 2 months. And it's up to 2 months. So that you don't have to do it for all of eternity when they change, but it's just to make sure that those students are getting access to what they need to make their transition more smooth. You may recall that there was a student-involved incident in which a student was killed up in El Dorado County. It was a student with special needs at a non-public school. So AB 1172 from Fraser puts some more kind of teeth in the law, making some, you have to visit the school once a year, I think it is. You have to take a look at it before the student gets there. And then it gives the Department of Education more teeth in going in and closing down the school if they think something's going wrong. Given I'm from Sacramento, I just saw on the news actually that they're charging 3 people with the death of that student. I believe it's the principal, the teacher, and then there was one other person with involuntary manslaughter. So terrible, of course. This bill is one of a couple that was in response to that. So just so that you know what's out there. And then one more report, and I think I'm done. The LAO, so the Legislative Analyst Office, they're supposed to be nonpartisan support for the legislature and their policy making. Just released a new overview of special education in California. They did a similar, probably deeper dive 3 or 4 years ago into special education. So we should see this. I think this kind of goes hand in hand with what the administration wants to do with special education or wanting to do something, right? The legislature wanting to do something, and then the LAA coming in and saying, here's some ideas. So that report's out there. I can get the links to Shannon if you guys want to read it. But to me, just skimming the summary, it doesn't say anything new other than we need more funding. We need to do more. The increase was, students identified with special needs, of course, is increased, 28% over the last 10 years. So it's I think, a good and continued push while there was money in the budget this past year. I don't know that I think it's helpful and more movement that we've seen in 9 years, but we're not there yet. So I think that the more places that you're pushing, on these important issues, I think the further that you get. So, so hopefully that will be helpful. Let's see. I don't know what else. Is there anything I have not covered that you have questions about? Or more importantly, is there anything that you'd like me to take back to Sacramento and what you think is positive, negative, difficult? Like what are your challenges? What are some things that the state has done to help you? Or would you like the state to just leave you alone? Yes. Oh, wait, hold on. You have to have your mic in a box.
Back in September, Barrett gave us a little bit of an update on legislation related to career technical education, a little bit of maybe how AB 1303 ended up last year, and mentioned that there may be some legislation coming about again this year. Do you have any knowledge or any update on anything related to CTE and CTE funding?
I think that the legislature is interested in CTE funding in particular, and the administration. The bill introduction deadline isn't until mid-February. It's usually the third Friday in February. So we won't know if there's a new piece of legislation until then. I think I'd keep an eye on the governor's Jan 10 budget to see if there's anything in there. You know, his staff indicated that that was something he was interested in. So we should keep an eye on it. And always, it's better if something goes in the budget. It's just easier. It happens faster. It's less political. You know, if you have to run a bill to do something, a lot of time, I mean, it's just not how it works. You have a bill that does the policy, but all of the money flows through the budget and the budget negotiations in the final budget act, right? So even if you have a bill that provides funding in the bill for CTE in this case, it's very unlikely that the governor signs it because the deal on the budget's already been done, right? So we'll stay tuned next year or next time we come down. How often do you meet? Is it like set? Once a quarter? Oh, okay. So after the bill deadline, we'll know. Okay. Okay. Was there a question over here before? No? Anyone else? Yes.
Assembly Bill 738, which is asks for a curriculum for Native American students or Native American curriculum. It wasn't funded. There was no dollars behind it.
I don't know that he signed it. I don't know that it got
I think it's signed. It was approved October 9th. I don't know if he signed 2017.
Approved October 9th. Okay. So there's no money behind it?
There's no money behind it.
Probably $800,000. That's probably a typical.
There's no money behind it.
Yeah, they're going to need money. It probably says in the bill that it's contingent upon an appropriation in the budget. That's how they get around what I just explained as an appropriation. I would argue with the Department of Finance that if he signs a bill, then he's committed the state to funding that. So we can certainly ask that question to the Department of Finance. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Yes.
Can you talk more about possible one-time funding?
I think there's going to be some. Don't spend it on ongoing costs. But what it is I think that Linda Darling-Hammond, who's the president of the State Board of Education, I think that she has the governor's ear on lots of things. So if she has ideas on one-time funding, she's probably going to have a lot to say about it. So maybe some teacher stuff, my guess. Maybe some whole child stuff. But really it will depend on how much money there is and what everybody can agree on how to spend it. But, you know, the one-time funds are nice. They're just one time. But it's better than nothing at all, right? Anyone else? Don't be shy. That's it? All right. Well, if you have questions, if you would like any of these reports, the audits, anything like that, we'd be happy to provide them to Shannon so that she can send them out to the group. Also, if there's questions about legislation moving forward, just shoot me an email. Let me know. I'd be happy to respond to you. And thank you for having me. And thank you for making me a partner.
Sorry about that.
No, that's a
I
good
think
thing.
we
Not
should
a bad
send that
thing.
slide to your boss. Okay, if you at your tables could just process for a moment what you heard and discuss any implications for you based on what you heard at your district, so we do a little bit of that networking. All right? So if you're, just have that discussion at your table. Thanks. Okay, if you could finish up your thoughts and your discussion, and we'll transition. All right. Thank you. And next we have our wonderful Christine Shipman to give you an LCAP update.
Good morning, everybody. Ooh, that was a little bit of a sleepy sound. Good morning. Thank you so much. It's the principal voice in me. So before I get started on LCAP updates, just a little breaking news. There's a flyer in the center table. Tonight we are hosting an event for USC Graduate School of Education, the Rossier School of Education, for the EDD program in educational leadership. Dr. David Cash will be here from 4:30 to 6 p.m. It's a no obligation meeting. But our team did send out the flyer to all of our districts. Our charter person was out on vacation. We were not able to access the listserv, so I apologize for that inability to communicate with all of our charter peeps. But if you are interested, I will be here and helping to host that. Just a little plug for the program at USC. I'm in the EDD program for organizational change and leadership, so it's slightly different. I chose one that wasn't specifically education focused. This is ed leadership focused. So if you have been thinking about completing your doctorate, definitely figure out what is the best fit for you. But some of the perks of this program is 1 night a week classes and just some stats for you to know, not speaking ill of any other program, but currently across the state, approximately 30% of the superintendents that are being hired right now are coming out of USC's Rossier School of Education. So if that's something that you're considering, it might be something to look into and vet the program and see if it's a good fit for you. And I'm done plugging that. So if you'd like a flyer, I've done my part. Please join us tonight. And who is now ready to talk about LCAP? Oh, wow. That was a little lackluster. So I'm going to ask you to do one thing first. If I talk too loud, I'm going to pull that back. If you could, refresh the slides that you have in front of you. I will not be able to refresh what's here on the webcast, but for everybody in webcast land, whatever is in the Google folder is the most up-to-date version of the slides. There are some things that I'm going to speak to, but not put up on the webcast, if you catch my drift. There's some things I'm going to speak to and I'm giving you in your slides that do not become part of the archived version of this webcast. So everything that I say today is, what is the time right now? It's 9:47. So this is the information as of Thursday, November 14th at 9:47 a.m. It is subject to change. I always say that, and especially in this changing landscape. I am here with you today because our team is up at the LCAP training right now, an LCAP training that is happening without an approved template. So, as you can tell, everybody in the state is having to adjust right now. So I'm partly in the LCAP world, but I'm no longer your LCAP approver. I am a support provider in my new role, and so I'll talk about that at the very end. And anything that I share with you is on behalf of the LCAP team, which is now still continuing Deborah Hernandez, but added into the team is Melissa Spaden, who is now the Director of System of Support and has stepped in to fill my shoes on the LCAP team. So those will be your 2-point people for this year. Excellent power team, and I'll still be there to support in this transition year. But before we get started, I know you just did a little bit of a table talk, and there are some newer faces that are newer to their roles. So I'd love it if you can share at your table or buddy up with another table and talk for 3 to 4 minutes about what lesson or lessons you've learned from developing previous versions of the LCAP that you believe are helpful and you'd like to share with your colleagues. So this is those lessons from the trenches, good, bad, and ugly. Spend 3 or 4 minutes dialoguing at your table, and then we'll come back together and share whatever you feel comfortable with the entire group. We'll come back together in 4 minutes. If you're brand new to your role, I'd suggest turning and adding to another table so you can learn. We'll take about 1 more minute and come back together. As you're coming back together, if you still do not have access to the most up-to-date slides, I made a quick bit.ly link for you that is up here in red, and that is a capital N lowercase o-v. So C-I-N, big N, little o-v, just in case you don't have access to the most up-to-date slides, as you'll want those. All right, I would love to hear from our experts in the field. Please, as you want to speak, speak into the blue box. Anybody want to share lessons that you've learned from developing previous versions of the LCAP? Good, bad, or ugly? Go ahead. Oh, go ahead. She wanted to speak.
I think one of the key pieces is the preciseness of the technical language. That you know, I was often too wordy, and wasn't. I needed to be tighter and more technical, and I think to say the same thing. And I was one of the things, like I had to see it and hear it mimicked. I mean, Christine helped me. And so I saw the trend, the pattern, almost the register. I guess that's what it was. It was the register in which you wrote, and I think that makes a world of difference.
So learning kind of the flow. LCAPs come in lots of different forms, but one of the things is precision and making your thinking clear. So thank you for sharing that. Any other words of wisdom from individuals in the room? Bruce?
Just starting early, as you know, even though the template, I know she had to be approved and all that, but just starting early with your teams and keeping everybody organized and meeting all the way through was the biggest wake-up call for me. Just making sure everybody's involved and meeting early.
Awesome, thank you. Sorry, I forgot to put the HTTP. It won't work if you don't put that in front of it. My apologies. Anybody else want to share lessons from the field? So Bruce's comment was about the starting early. Bruce and team have developed a timeline of all of their key activities that they circle back to and revise every year. So it maps things out in a stretched format so it doesn't feel super compacted, including the writing, the revising, the when drafts are published. So that's something that him and the team replicate year over year. So precise language, timelining it out. Any other words of wisdom? We have newbies amongst us.
We had a conversation at our table about the balance between being specific and being general. That sometimes we write action steps that are so very specific that they're limiting, and yet you also need to write them that they're specific enough that you're actually doing something. So trying to find that balance is important.
Yes, definitely a great call out where we want it to be transparent so that people know what we're actually funding, but not so narrow that if something needed to shift and breathe, that we're able to adjust without having to write a novel in the annual update. Yeah, so thank you for that. So with that, we're going to go ahead and move forward. So thank you for your words of wisdom. Any others that you would like to share throughout this section? I know they will be very valuable. Each of you have very unique contexts and experiences, but the thing you have in common is the LCAP journey. I feel like we're all like a tribe together around this. So I'm going to talk a little bit around what the suggested changes are from the old to the new, but I'm gonna, before I hop into that, let you know a little bit about what's happening. So as Kathy mentioned, an audit report came out. Our county office was an active part of that audit, so myself and the team were, I don't want to say sequestered, but slightly under the level of interrogation. We were involved in some deep conversations over a period of a number of months with a panel of state auditors that came here in residence to San Diego, and they interviewed us and our business team. There was one specific district that they were looking at, It was not every district, and that district is now public. It was San Diego Unified, and they knew that they were part of it. But what was being examined was our processes. How did we provide support early and often? And I will let you know on the front end that the auditors came in with a bias, a deficit mindset bias, to prove why LCFF and LCAPs weren't working well. That was what their charge was from the legislature, is to find out why the outcomes are not dramatically improving across the schools. And so while the conversation came about, well, it's underfunded, that wasn't what they were looking for. So, and I say that in all transparency, that it was, the nature of it was to find why things aren't working. And no matter how much we shared how things were working well, it was still intended to produce a report of what wasn't working. I think that's important for you all to know the context of it, so that when you read that audit report, you look at it through that vein, that that was the task of the auditor's office, was to really find out what was broken and to really go unearthing. So even if something appeared to work, to find that one or two things that wasn't working and highlight that. And so what you'll see in the report are a couple of key findings that really underscore the work of what we've been doing as a county. Thankfully, our processes as a county office, as it relates to LCAP support, came through unscathed. We were one of the few county offices that had a really robust system of support. But that wasn't mentioned in the audit because, again, that wasn't the intent of it. It wasn't to highlight or spotlight positive practices. And so while that was something we came back to over and over again, that was pulled off to the side to really focus in on what their task was. I do want to let you all know that, because if you do go in and read it, it feels heavy. That report doesn't feel good. Even though San Diego isn't specifically mentioned, it's very personal work for each of you. You take a lot of pride in it, and that's what we tried to emphasize over and over again. That's not going to come through, but it's what we know here behind the scenes. And so that's how we operate. So with that being said, as we sat in our last exit meeting with the auditors going over the draft report, and they let us know their findings, I said to the auditors, as one of their recommendations was that there needs to be an overhaul of the template. And I said, well, which template are you talking about? Are you talking about the current one that's in place? Or are you talking about the one that's going to the Board of Education in 2.5 weeks? And they looked with blank stares and said, there's a new template moving forward. And I said, that should be part of your audit, to do some type of analyzing of what's being proposed to see if it remedies some of the solutions. It's on the state board website. We were the first individuals to say to them, it's a public document, here you go, and send them the links. I don't know what happened behind the scenes, but about 10 days later, it was announced that the template wouldn't be going through for the November board meeting. So we can all speculate, we don't want to, but the reality is it didn't go through in November as we all anticipated. A stakeholders survey came out, and I hope that you all are on the listserv with the LCFF or LCAP to be able to give feedback. If not, get on it, please. Because what happened was a stakeholder feedback was sent out to have people look over every single aspect of the template with a deadline of submitting your feedback by November 1. Well, the template was supposed to be approved around November 9. So we knew when we saw that date that things were going to shift. We just did not expect for them to shift all the way back until mid-January. So with that being said, I'm going to share with you some slides of the template that was proposed prior to being pulled from the November agenda, because that's all that we have access to right now. No other drafts have been shared. And this is what's being used with the CSESA training right now, not to train on the template, but to train around the thinking and to let you know what some of the shifts in thinking were for our state level leaders. My intent isn't to create confusion. It's just to let you know, kind of keep an awareness so that when whatever template we get lands, we have a little bit of background knowledge and thinking around the shift at the state level. So before I move forward, are there any questions on anything that I've just mentioned? Is it easy to quantify the findings for the audit report? Yes, I'm going to, after the template, I have 2 slides in this slide deck, not this slide deck, that I will go over the findings and the key considerations for you as district leaders. We don't know whether or not that's going to make its way in, but as Kathy was stating, that was supplied to the legislature. It wasn't to the State Board of Education. And so the intent was to supply them a report that was actionable to create new bills around. So one of the things that we said over and over again is please stop complicating the work of districts with additional regulations and allow us to focus on it as strategic planning. That wasn't one of the findings, but we did try over and over again, Kim. So from the state board level and from the template that was being proposed, some of the findings was in the old LCAP template that there was accounting for action level expenditures of LCFF supplemental and concentration dollars. If you'll recall, we had to go through with a fine-tooth comb. Our business team had to add up every single line item and make sure that everything balanced out at the end for each of the different budgets you included. You had to quantify how you're increasing and improving services for unduplicated pupils, qualitatively or quantitatively. You had to explain every single action, basically repeating what was in the body of the LCAP. Your contributing and not contributing actions had to match specific funding sources. So this is the old, just reviewing what we've had for the last several years. There were also repetitive sections, making the plan super long, identifying the greatest progress, or the greatest areas of need at the beginning of the LCAP, and then having to include the identified need in the body of the LCAP, and then having to, in the annual update, explain how you're meeting the need. It was a lot of redundancy and things that we had to ensure was still in place, which did tie up some of the approval processes. And then the stakeholder engagement section was really focused on dates and ensuring that there was a minimum of dates and the groups represented for approvability purposes. While you could have a lot of narrative, and we said a best practice is to include the nature of engagement, the required minimum for approval was dates and groups being included. So the proposed adjustments within the revised LCAP template moving forward is shifting away from the identified need and focusing in on why the goal is important. So not just stating data, 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 but really getting into the why and the thinking of the district behind why we're saying that this is our overarching goal. It can be a little bit more narrative. Also the simplifying of the inclusion of dollars within the actions. So this is the reason why we believe, again, we're kind of inferring, why we believe that the template was pulled. As you'll see in a couple of minutes, the revised actual LCAP template took away any mention of supplemental and concentration dollars, and it just said LCFF. So it would bundle together base and SNC so that you wouldn't have to account for which was which in the plan. You would only have to say, yes, we're saying that this plan's contributing, or this action's contributing, or it's not. So we wouldn't have that box checking issue where it's, oh, you said it's contributing, but it doesn't have SNC funds. You need to go back and revise. So it was simplifying that issue. But we heard a lot of advocacy groups outcrying around this because they felt that it was decreasing transparency. So while we were trying to simplify and streamline and create a plan that's more readable, it, on the other end, wasn't transparent enough. So that was a sticking point. So that may have some adjustments. Also streamlining the template to make it readable. The revised template is going to be drop downs as they anticipate it, and DTS, if you're in DTS, is going to make those adjustments also, but a lot more streamlined. And the stakeholder section is proposed to include more narrative responses. So instead of us saying, oh, reading through, do you have everything listed for every stakeholder group? The boxes would already be in the template for you, and you would respond within each of the corresponding sections. So I'll show you what that looks like in just a couple more slides. So again, this is the proposed template. I put this on every single slide to make sure that nobody copies this off. It's proposed, it's not SBE approved. It could be revised significantly before the January board meeting. One moment. The team up in Sacramento is texting right now. Okay, so I've just been told to not get into a lot of the details around the template. So I'm just including these slides as a reference. I'll still, talk through just a little bit of the thinking behind it. And I've also been informed that we shouldn't go in too much detail on the state audit report, as another corresponding report was just issued this morning in complete opposition. So as I said, it's 20 minutes past, so things are changing quickly. So I'm just going to talk high-level overview of the LCAP as a strategic plan. Best laid plans, everybody. We live not at the district, but we feel your pain. We try to buffer it as much as possible. So give me just a second to rethink here. Recalibrating. Okay. So starting off with the beginning section, the budget overview for parents is anticipated to still be in place. So one of the things that you could be doing at this phase of the work is to be thinking about what your areas of greatest progress are and your areas of need. Because those narratives, no matter what the box looks like, are things that will have to be included within the LCAP template. So one of the things that we really encourage you to do is have these conversations early and often. Even keep a Google Doc where you're writing down some of the statements, so then whatever template comes up, you're able to plug in some of that content. So the dashboard is getting ready to come out in just a couple of weeks. It's starting to release indicators for review right now. We're under that little window. But as the dashboard comes up in early December, a really strong use of time would be that as you are reviewing the findings with your cabinet level teams and you're looking over the dashboard indicators, that you're documenting some of those conversations. What are the things that you're identifying students are performing in the red and the orange for? We know that we're going to have to include student group gaps, and in the past it's been looking at the reds and oranges, looking at the reds and oranges overall, looking at significant achievement gaps. So including that as the context of your conversation is a great way to be planning right now to even start developing some guiding reflective questions for you as a cabinet team to consider, for you to infuse into your DLAC meetings, for you to provide to your principals to include within their school site council meetings to start generating some of that input and that feedback. Be a really strong use of your time right now to kind of set the frame for how we're going to enter into LCAP work. This is a new 3-year cycle, and so remembering that these goals and actions and services that we put in place set our course for the 3 years really helps us look at strategically how to move. So as you're weaving in those conversations around data and needs and progress, weaving in trends from the past 2 to 3 years. So not looking at just this current year as a standalone, but helping your entire school community to look at what that trend is, to really capture whether or not that is a need or if it's an anomaly. So you're going to have a reflection of successes or greatest progress. You're going to have a reflection or some inclusion of what the needs are. So those are things that you can be planning for in your meetings as we go through right now. We do know that there will be an updated CSI list coming out this year. We're trying to do some predictive work to figure out who that might be. It's only working if we have your district's data in the CORE Data Collaborative dashboards. For those that aren't participating in CORE, please talk with me. I am the lead on that here at the county. But CORE is able to take some of our data that's in there and do predictive analytics work around forecasting whether or not you might have any sites in CSI, TSI, or ATSI. And so that's helpful for us as we provide some targeted supports and figure out how we can engage in early communication to support with SIPSAs. So some of our sites that have come on board with CORE have asked for, or some of our districts that have come on site with CORE have asked for me to come out and work with principals around the development of SIPSA metrics and really getting into a needs assessment. And so we've started to incorporate that so that when it comes time to report out on how the district has supported the assessment of needs, that's an easy get right there, that you've engaged in the assessment of needs through the analysis of student achievement data in alignment with the research coming out of CORE, it works really well. We can, I don't want to say check that box, but we can show that we've engaged in that, as well as our team is starting to incorporate some of the Core Data Collaborative analytics into the CSI modules to help with that. So we know that no matter what that looks like, CSI is going to have to be accounted for somewhere in the plan. Again, this is just a draft, and I'm not showing you the template for the purposes of anchoring into this, but again, it's the thinking behind how are we documenting the work we're engaging in with each of our stakeholder groups. So again, an easy way to really start documenting the work is to pull each of these state-required stakeholder groups, because we know that they are required for approvability purposes, and to start writing out how your district is engaging with your stakeholders, or if you haven't thought of a specific a stakeholder group to engage with, what might you do right now to plan for authentic engagement moving forward? And it can be in a number of different ways. Feedback or input around LCAP goals. It can be around data trends. It doesn't mean that the stakeholder groups have to specifically provide input on every action. It's that you're engaging them in helping to identify what the needs are of the district. And then later in the LCAP somewhere, you reflect how you've incorporated what they've surfaced. Best practice in this area is to do just that, to steer away a little bit from getting down to the analyzing goals and actions, and instead surfacing trends and what might be a need that's surfacing, and are we meeting that with our current actions? If not, what might we do? Some districts have found great success in that. One of the things that I will say that you might want to steer a bit away from is putting a whole list of, like a menu of choices, and saying, you know, which of these do you think is the best use of our resources? Because what happens is if a stakeholder group doesn't see their specific action reflected, they might feel their voice isn't valued. So again, going into this holistic input, still engaging around gaps and equity, continuous improvement is definitely a best practice. So again, not focusing in on the template, but the thinking behind it. One of the things that has been an evolution in this template is the question of how is progress being measured? So progress and effectiveness are through lines that we're seeing surface from the State Board of Education. So how is progress being measured as it relates to expected annual measurable outcomes? Being really clear and being able to report out on whether or not outcomes are resulting. So dashboard has been something that a lot of individuals have used as metrics, but again, if you're a core district, there's a really nice LCAP view in there that lets you look at percent of met or exceeded, lets you look at your differentiated gaps. So I will be supporting our core districts with some sentence streams that align with those. Again, not trying to put plug it too much, but I do want to let you know that that is a free service we're providing. Same thing with actions. We would encourage you to keep them concise, precise, and fewer rather than many. Standard that we have seen is typically 3 to 5 goals. 5 is kind of our longer. Most districts go for 4. And so finding one that encompasses academics, or 2 that encompass academics, one that encompasses culture, climate, encompasses culture and climate and social emotional learning, and then one that incorporates parent engagement, stakeholder engagement, and building capacity internally. Those are what we tend to see. So some people will split up mathematics and language arts into 2 separate goals. Please keep in mind that LCFF is founded on a base of broad course of study. And so we're looking at all subjects. When we originally developed the LCAP, it really was focused in on specific subject areas. But we really want to encourage you, especially with your metrics, to be thinking about broad course of study, the whole child. How are you creating actions and services that are meeting the needs of students across multiple content areas? Specifically bringing in some of the advocacy groups have been surfacing the lack of representation of career pathways in a really clear manner in LCAPs across the state, as well as significant underrepresentation of VAPA and health education. And so really pulling those in, being intentional and thoughtful about your planning over the next 3 years would be really important. If the template comes out and you don't have to specifically align SNC funds with a specific action, you just can mark it contributing or not contributing, that really does help with the inclusion of multiple content areas, because it doesn't create as much attention with people thinking that you're funding things that quote unquote shouldn't be funded. Question so far? Yes, I saw your look. Go ahead, Sharmila.
So Christine, are they going to, like in title, they have because there's such nuances with the SNC, right? There's a lot of flexibility, but it almost in that way causes the ambiguity, right? So after having had the LCAP for as long as, are we going to have some kind of list, like in title, we have allowable and non-allowable? Because I've seen the gamut of SNC used in some interesting ways that don't read like the intent, or is it going to remain the way it is?
As of 10:19 a.m. on November 14th, it's a really good question that you raise up. It's going to remain as is, and I'll tell you a little bit about why that is. There's a real hesitancy to put a list of do and do nots, because that goes along with the old categorical mindset versus what is in the spirit of LCFF. You'll hear us talk about that, and so we'll ask you that. The team will ask you that through the draft sessions, the development sessions, and we're not calling them fast passes anymore. It's draft review sessions. Is this in alignment with the spirit of LCFF? And pushing back a little bit on that. When we ask you that question, it's not because we're trying to be hard-nosed or anything. It's because something might be kind of piquing our curiosity to say, is that going to flag an advocacy group? Could this be something that somebody surfaces and puts on the front page of the San Diego Union Tribune? We don't want that for you. So there are best practices, there are what needs to happen, and then there's this whole gray area of it really shouldn't be paid for from SNC, but the state's not going to tell you. It'll just be an advocacy group or the ACLU surfacing it. We really don't want that for you. So ask us, ask the team, any of our team. Anything that you ask us isn't going to be now we send that to CDE and mention your district name. We're super careful. If we ever ask for clarification around anything, just so you know, we'll say to CDE, a hypothetical district in a hypothetical area of the state may or may not have the following concern. We're just wondering, if that was to happen, what would your response be from a CDE perspective? Not saying that that's the reality. And that's kind of the, we massage things around that, but we don't reveal district names because we don't want attention on your LCAPs, because you all are doing really good work. We just want to make sure that you're protected.
And I think in particular,
yeah, hypothetically speaking,
there are rising special ed costs, right? And we have declining enrollment. So we're looking at less ADA, and when you're looking at special ed, for encroachment, some of us look at S&C and kind of see it as title. It's above and beyond, right? The intent behind it. Obviously, not all districts get it, and there's a reason for it. And I guess that's where I think the parameters are, like how much of that, our special ed population's rising, enrollment's declining, ADA is dropping, but those services are still legally mandated. How much of, where's that wiggle room in there, or is it playing base? And I think that is going to be, I can't imagine that this hypothetical district is the only district that is experiencing that, and what would that mean and look like?
Right. Hypothetically speaking, there are a number of districts across large county offices and county regions that are encountering this escalating cost of special education as well as transportation. So we feel like something's got to give. it can't continue. Something's going to have to come of it. We don't know what that is going to be. But we still, for approval purposes with the LCAP, have to align with the approvability guidelines, which is when it comes to very questionable expenditures, we're going to have to call them out and ask for language to be adjusted because as of now, 10:23 a.m., the special education student group is not listed as an unduplicated pupil group, and they can be twice identified, so there can be students with disabilities who also are unduplicated pupils, and so providing services above and beyond would be appropriate in alignment with their unduplicated pupil status or their twice identified status. But I'm going to say this as a blanket statement. Our entire team is here to support you and to try to help this process be as painless as possible. We know there's a lot of requirements and they're increasing every year, but our role as a county office is a service provider. Without you all, we don't have jobs. So you are our clients, you are our customers, for lack of a better term. We want to make sure that you are well served. So I say that from my position. Please, I'll give you my email address at the end and my scheduling link. It's yours to use with whatever questions you might have. But please, I get texts and calls from individuals frequently. We want to help you troubleshoot through this so that you're able to pass an LCAP through your board adoption and through the approval process that you're really proud of. Thank you for the question. So again, not getting into the template as much. Going into this screen here was, again, around the metrics and how is progress being measured. So this is really giving you an opportunity to develop some high quality metrics. We do have 24 to 27 state required metrics. They cannot, I don't want to say cannot, it is not recommended that you condense them or combine them together, specifically as it relates to A through G and broad course of study. We allowed that to go through for the last couple of years, but be thinking about how you are measuring and monitoring progress for students completing A through G. Separately, looking at students that are identified as college and career ready, that is a metric, and then broad course of study. Broad course of study and A through G can no longer be the same metric. And I'm speaking specifically to unified and high school districts. So separating those out. Broad course of study includes how are you providing access to students to a broad range of courses. For the elementary level, this is a relevant metric. And the spirit of this for elementary is ensuring that even though students with disabilities aren't called out as unduplicated pupils, ensuring that students with disabilities and English learner students aren't being pulled out of things such as physical education, health, visual and performing arts, and science and history, just to receive supports for this other identified area. So it's ensuring that all students have access to a broad course of study, not just that it's scheduled in the day, but how are you creating systems to monitor that every child has access to that. So thinking through that and even having conversations about that right now would be something that would be of great benefit to you, because it can vary based off of school sites. This is really something that is a site level metric, but you have to account for it at a district level. So it allows you to have conversations around equity, opportunity, and access, and having conversations with your site leaders around how they're ensuring that for every single student. What mechanisms do they have in place? And then how is that bubbling up to a district level so that you can capture data? It's a really worthy conversation, and it is the single metric that we have the hardest time finding in LCAPs, because we feel like it's a little bit softer because it is typically something that is site level monitoring. So be thinking about that. How is that something that you are monitoring at a district level? How are you engaging in conversations? How are you as a leader able to stand up and write a metric that says, yes, we know that this is the current reality for access to broad course of study? Yeah, Kim? Great question. So because we're going into a new cycle, we're going to be pulling new samples. So we'll be putting together some of those exemplars to be able to provide some guidance on, and I actually have a little planning document now to help you write out the different components of a metric to help you build a really high quality metric. So we'll put some of that info in there. Yeah, great question, thank you. All of these things are under development, so if you think of things like that that you need moving forward into the development cycle, please shoot us an email, and those are some of the content items that we start to develop at this time of year. Okay, so the biggest change in the increased or improved services, this is going to be, I believe, if it goes through more on an approvability side, is less of an emphasis on quantifying everything that's increasing or improving services because you've already identified whether or not something's contributing, but really getting into the why. So the DICEP section in the past, the demonstration of increased improved services for unduplicated pupils section, has been one that's been problematic as it's evolved with making sure that everything's accounted for. We anticipate that this is going to include more global responses, but we don't know for sure. We will know more in January, so that's a to be determined. Expenditure tables, this is something we included just for your reference to kind of see what the line of thinking is from SBE. I'm not going to hop into it. I am going to give you some time to talk right now. And first of all, we're going to have a 3 to 5 minute conversation around needs assessment. So the thinking behind this is as we launch into a new 3-year LCAP cycle, the focus is really on developing a needs assessment that pulls out what the trends are from your districts to identify what those common threads are that you need to develop actions and services around to keep the district moving forward. So my question for you as a group is if you could talk about how your team is determining what the needs are, and then what structures, resources have you found most helpful in determining successes and needs as you approach developing a new LCAP. So I'm going to give you 5 minutes to talk at your table. It would be best if you're in a group of 3 or more to have some triangulated conversations. So I'd encourage you, if you're not in a group of 3, to find a third friend to join you. And we'll come back together in 5 minutes. I'm not looking at any tables in particular. There are several. All right, friends, one more minute and we'll come back together. All right, friends, welcome back. So I would love to hear from you all. You don't have to break up the party. It's okay, because we're going to talk a little bit more. I think I have one more question for you. I would love to hear from you all how you approach needs assessments as it relates to the strategic planning process. Is there anybody that would like to share how your district is launching into this at the beginning of a new 3-year cycle? Any volunteers? I have a really good teacher wait time, FYI. Anybody? Every idea is a good idea. Gina, is that you volunteering? Oh, thank you so much. That was not you being voluntold, I promise.
Oh, sorry. You know, of course you use your data to take a look at that, but we're just getting our dashboard data. You know, we've looked at the assessment data already on the state assessment, but that's just one piece, you know. Qualitative data is just as important, and looking at, you know, through walkthroughs and such, and looking at what's needed, and surveys of teachers and students, all of that piece contributes to the assessment. And then also looking at research and looking at your systems in the district and whether they're all aligned and coherent. That's another part of the needs assessment for us anyway. So it's not just one thing, it's a whole lot of things.
So how do you capture that info, Gina? Do you have, like, in your district, do you have some system for curating notes around that? Because I think that that's where some districts are wrestling with, is we have these great conversations through the year, but how do I capture that?
I think, well, I make notes, you know, because I'm ultimately the one to write the LCAP, so I do that in conversations within the division, and we work together around that. So I will draft something and get input from everyone in the division so that we make certain that we include all of it. Right now we're doing a lot of work with our counselors and, you know, and our social workers and all for that support. And so looking at what comes of the counselors' meetings as they go through this training, that will be important too. So it's all of that work and capturing to create that you know, picture of what's happening in the district and where we need to go to support students.
Thank you for sharing. And right behind you, Kim has some ideas.
Well, I was just building off what Gina said, and you would ask her how do you curate those ideas.
I'm talking a little bit closer to the box. Sorry. Thank you.
So we were engaging in a process, a district learning team process, and I was speaking to Jessica McCreary, and she suggested creating some some slides. So we've started with just some Google Slides, and every time we have a committee meeting or we meet with stakeholders, if we have a DAC meeting or DLAC meeting, we just add to that slide deck, so that at the end we have this group of this body of evidence that we could pull from.
That's a great, easy way to capture how needs have surfaced over the course of a year. Thank you for sharing that. Super easy hack right there that you can share with multiple people. Any other ideas how you're approaching a needs assessment?
One of the questions I asked out loud was, I think so many of us are in differentiated assistance and really participated in a robust needs assessment through that. And how do we use those critical conversations, the data review that we did stakeholder engagement around the ideas that were coming out of differentiated assistance. So how do we use that information in our LCAP? Because it feels like they should be connected.
Yes, thank you. And I will let you know, for districts that have, that's like a great plug right there, Cindy, that have or will be entering into differentiated assistance, is that the exit process at the end of a year, not the exiting of DA, but the culmination, is a letter that we co-write around how those needs are going to be surfaced within the LCAP. And then we did actually create a process this year to pre-review every LCAP to see, before those draft FastPass sessions, see what the presence was of not just mentioning DA, but the spirit of what surfaced within the differentiated assistance process, and then provided some feedback around how to incorporate it, because that is a built-in needs assessment. If you're a year one, you engage in a data institute, a root cause analysis, some elements surface as a result of that. Now, everybody entered in during an LCAP cycle, a 3-year cycle. The difference is now, if you are still engaging in the DA process and you're going to be engaging with the county for your supports through differentiated assistance, how are you capturing those notes? We're trying to build in those mechanisms so it's easier to just plug and play. But great idea. How are we incorporating what comes through the differentiated assistance process? If you're a district leader attending the CSI sessions and there's a needs assessment involved, how are you blending this so that you don't feel like all you're doing is needs sensing in your organization for 7 months? So thank you for that. Any other ideas? Okay, so our next topic of conversation is kind of a statement. First, the LCAP is required to incorporate annual measurable outcomes across a range of data points. How do you approach setting AMAOs and targets? And how do you decide on the performance target for all student groups? This is something that's surfaced in conversations across districts for the last couple of years, is, well, how do I set a worthy target? So sometimes I'm just guessing and I'm saying, oh, well, maybe 2 or 3% will be good, and then 5% for our student groups that are lower performing to close the gap. So it's not said in a way of insincerity, but there's a lack of tools sometimes. So a table conversation for 4 minutes around how do you set your expected annual measurable outcomes, and how do you decide on the performance targets for all student groups, and let's have some collective learning. We'll come back together in 3-4 minutes. Mhm. But then, Sharmila, that's where you get into this. That's where I was looking. Yeah, where is that? Oh, where is that? That's what I was looking at. Okay, okay. Okay, everybody, we took an extra 30 seconds on that. I'm not going to have a whole group share out on this. Great conversations. I hate to interrupt them. I appreciate you engaging in those table discussions. I know how valuable it is to collectively learn from one another. I'm going to transition over to Olympia in just a minute. She's going to talk about upcoming events. I will tell you, I left a slide that references key considerations in this slide deck. These key considerations do not come from any specific report, but they are, hot topics, things that have been swirling around. I kind of might have extracted a couple of key considerations for you to be thinking of as you enter into planning. What my assistant superintendent informed me of is that there is, that's the text that I just got, while the audit came out, there's an oppositional report. So they're asking us to not go into the details of the audit right now. The reason for that is we don't want to create confusion within the system. We want to come to you when we have solid information. So that's why I've just captured some key considerations, because they are, and it's not here on this slide deck, it's just things for you to be mindful of as you're planning forward with your LCAP. And the last thing that I'll say, and I apologize again that this slide isn't available up on the webcast, but it is on the bit.ly link that I've provided here, is in my new capacity, coming out of the LCAP team and now working with the Southern California System of Support. My focus really is on data literacy, continuous improvement, and equity support across our region. So that's our 5 counties south of LA, south and east of LA. but really focusing in on San Diego first. So what that means to you all is that you have open opportunity to have me come and work with you and your teams. As it relates to any of those elements, equity is really with the equity team, but as it relates to data literacy, as you heard me mention, our core districts within San Diego County have had some unique access to professional learning, but our entire team is here to support you all in data literacy and developing data culture. And that's something that we can come out and provide. We've been working with some of our districts to develop standalone professional learnings where we use whatever data protocols come to life in your district, but we create the professional learning around it so that it's in alignment. And we want to offer that to you so that you know that you have support as you're entering into a new LCAP cycle in whatever capacity you need us. So on the bit.ly link on slide 25, there is a calendaring link. So if you would like to meet with me, if you're newer to our county and you don't really know what all of the terms are that we've mentioned, you can schedule a 1 hour. I can either come to you or we can do it virtually, or 3 hours, whatever block of time. I'm here to support you, and that's my primary role now. So thank you for that. And last thing is Erin English over on the side has informed me that there is still some room in the Open Educational Resources, is it a conference? Professional learning, a 2-hour workshop, and she has put the flyers here in the center table for you all to access. And without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Olympia.
Okay, one update that we will be talking about is the differentiated assistance information is coming out as indicators are being released each week. We are learning who will be in DA. And one thing that we've learned is that charters will be in differentiated assistance this time as well. And it falls on the LEA, the authorizing LEA, to support the charter that's in differentiated assistance. So with that, we wanted you to just process that for a moment. And we're going to get some input from you as what support you might need in doing that. So at your tables, discuss what this means for you and what type of support you might need from us in helping you support the charters with the differentiated assistance. So go ahead. So I'm going to give you one more minute to finish your table discussions, and I'm going to bring the discussion to the whole group. Okay, I'm going to ask you to finish your thoughts at your table, and then we're going to bring the discussion to the whole group. Okay. If I could have your attention in 3, 2, and 1. Thank you. Aaron, we're bringing it whole group so that we can capture what you're going to share with us now, because we're here to support you in this process. So we would like to know in what ways that might support might come forward. So Aaron's going to be taking some notes. So I'm asking you to please share out what are some things that you might need. The template, the process, how to do it. So maybe one thing we had brainstormed is maybe doing some kind of like almost like a trainer of trainer type thing here to give you the support in order so you have not only the materials and the process, but you can ask questions and something like that. Okay. Other ways we might support.
Stepped us through it, and so we would just bring the charter with us as a part, if you have positive relationship with the charter, which we both do. So we would bring the charter with us as, I mean, I know we would have oversight, but the county had a very nice process in place.
And so you would follow the same process that we shared with you.
So that could depend upon what year you are. Right. So hypothetically, if you were to move into the next year of DA, you would be in DA year 3, where your charters will be in year 1. So to have them come and sit side by side with you, you're in 2 very different years, and the processes that we've set up for each year is very different. So that just kind of puts a kink in it. If there's a district who is year 1 and their charter is, and they wanted to do a side-by-side, that's plausible. I'm not going to say it's a definite, but the process looks different for year 1 than it would for a district who's in year 2 or a district who's in year 3. No, year 1 isn't going away. It's just some of the thinking that we're trying to generate is that CDE has said that the counties are responsible for differentiated assistance for the LEAs. And the LEAs are responsible for differentiated assistance support for their charters. Until the year 2022 is what is in legislation. So in 2022, then the counties are responsible. However, counties up and down the state are recognizing that some of our districts may not have, I don't know, fill in the word. I don't want to say capacity, but I mean, we're all very busy in our districts serving our student populations that it may not be plausible for our districts. So some of what we wanted to generate is what could it look like. So having a year 1 for all of those charters probably isn't possible because of the number of charters San Diego County have. We have over like 150 charters, whereas like Orange County has 25. Like the number of charters that we have in San Diego, and to be able to serve that number is a huge question in our minds. So one of the things we wanted to generate here today is what could support from us look like for you? Yeah. Sure. So we have a charter. We have one. Do you want to get charters in the DA year one? The expectation would be that the district
approve the charter would run a very similar program as to what we experienced at the county, but the district would do it only with that charter.
Correct.
And one more thing that the district would provide for the charter in that aspect, like it wouldn't be that they could come to the year one county kind of situation, because that wouldn't exist. Am I understanding that correctly?
I want to be really honest. We haven't figured this out. Like this is something that has just happened in the last week, because there was a webinar on Friday that talked about this and how COEs across the state have talked about how they're going to support their charters. But then when you look at like Sonoma, you look at Placer, you look at all of these different counties, they don't have the number of charters that we do. So while legislation says we don't need to support charters until 2022. We know that we need to support charters in some way, and we don't know what that looks like yet. And so what we thought is we could have a generative conversation about what could it look like and what kind of supports do you think you need. Some of you have a charter, some of you have multiple charters. So that was kind of the intent of this question.
Why there can be some awkwardness around this is I don't know that we have supported LEAs with the process by which we are supporting them as authorizers of charter schools. And so I think that as this conversation goes, it might also behoove us to make sure that we're working with our charter office so that it is part of a larger program that also has to do with, okay, so when your district is authorizing a charter, so what are the different supports? What are the different relationships that need to evolve so that this isn't such an awkward conversation? Because for some of your LEAs, like some of you, you're like, this is going to be a really uncomfortable situation. Like to have to come in and have some of the conversations we've never had to have. And I think that part of it is let's also take a look at the whole system by which we support charter schools, because I think then we can start building some of those relationships that then streamlines this and doesn't feel like it's so much us trying to react to this situation versus how do we build support, because these are still our kids.
Well, and I think, as a county, we're building the infrastructure, and we have a charter department. They're hiring in response to 2022, but that's not what's lying in front of us at this moment, at this time. So I don't know if everyone needs another minute to think with that additional information, or if you feel like you have some other suggestions.
I just wanted to add, and we may be unique in this, but we have two dependent charters, not independent charters. So I think about the awkwardness that you talk about if it's an independent charter. I also think about the message that sends to our dependent charters when they've always been seen as one of our schools and they operate as one of our schools, that now the district office is running that kind of a process. So some differences between independent and dependent, because I have significant issues of concern that if they see the district office as that compliance department doing DA, they're going to say, then why am I dependent? We might as well be independent. And so just something to think about for those of you that have different charter situations.
That's a good point. Anything else for us to take into consideration as we move forward in helping design what this might look like? Okay. Enough wait time, Christine? Okay.
I know I sound like a broken record. I'm going to plug this one more time. So we as a county have decided to start offering for our charters in the region to I don't want to say apply, but to get on an interest list to be considered for participating in the Core Data Collaborative. There is cost recovery for charters. Again, this is free for districts. We're covering the cost for all of our districts, but for charters, independent charters, there is a cost of participation associated that could help create some transparency around metrics that could help in the DA process. So if getting data and access to data has been difficult to you, for you as authorizers, you may want to direct charter leaders to me, and I can help support them with getting their name on the interest list.
Thank you, Christine. And I did want to give you a quick update on the English Learner Roadmap as the LP indicator is coming out. The English Learner Progress Indicator is coming out shortly here, and that will also play into the DA process for the first time. Just a reminder, you won't see a color for the LP indicator. You will only see status. There's not enough data to show the growth. There's not enough LPAC data since the LPAC is sort of fairly new to the field. So you will see like from very low to very high, only status, but it still counts in the indicators that count for the DA process. So there are two opportunities coming up. The information is in the folder around the English Learner Roadmap. There's a teacher toolkit training in December, on December 11th, that has at the elementary, middle, and high school level toolkits. And there's a overall English Learner Roadmap Trainer of Trainers that's happening with Dr. Olson leading that on March 26th and 27th here at the county. And then the Equity Conference is in January, the 16th through the 18th. Our executive leader, Jag of Equity, has done a wonderful job with the team of designing this Equity Conference, and it's going to be amazing. It's going to be an amazing experience, and the information is there January 16th and 17th at the San Diego Convention Center, as well as a link for you to register. And with that, we thank you. The next meeting is at February 6th, 2019 at the Poway Unified School District with an OMS link coming soon. I know there was a visit to Chula Vista. Shannon wanted to debrief that visit, but she will do that with you the next time she has an opportunity, and maybe debriefing 2 visits at that time. So we encourage you to attend the one that's at Poway, and then again, March 19th here will be the following CNI meeting. And thank you for coming and your wonderful support, and have a good day.